everybody, and thanks for joining me on this filmmaking journey. Today I'm going to talk about how I made this Super Mario in real life movie. So stick around, and in the end we'll also have some recommendations for other channels which really helped me to get this movie done. For one of the first shots, we really wanted to capture the feel of Mario. And how can we do that? Well, we made a field of grass. Well, we didn't actually make it ourselves, but it was there. And we filmed over there, and we did a sky replacement so that the sky was actually blue, and it doesn't really add up with shots that come after it, but I don't know, I think we just really wanted to capture the Mario feeling, you know? Pretty fair amount of work for a couple of shots, but once I got that done, they turned out really well and I like them, so let's check them out. Alright, so I've opened up this Blender file, and as you can see, I've got this brick texture right here. Well, actually it's not a brick just yet, but I'm going to show you how you can change the texture from one to another. Actually, it's quite simple. Everything that is black will become a certain texture, and everything that is white will become a certain texture. Now, why is that? That is because we have designated it to be so right here. I will show you how this works later. First of all, I have two principal BSDFs. So this is a different texture than this one. And these are just, this is I think like Red Castle Brick O2, you know, very popular. Those are the two textures that we are going to be mixing. Well, in order to do that, we actually need a mix shader. So you place the mix shader right there. But now we need to drive the factor. We want to know how and when something should be black or something should be white. Now, that is what we do right here with a gradient texture, and this is that gradient texture. So here you can see what that is doing. I've plugged that into a color ramp, makes it harder, makes it go up or down. So that is what the color ramp does with our gradient. So I've just kept it like this because I wanted to drive it using the map range node. But I have found that if I plug in a value node in the from minimal and I play around with it, I can change the gradient. I've put it to a negative value right here, but as soon as we go up to 1 or 0.999, it's black. So I use this as the sole driver of those keyframes. Very close by because it had to change, but you can see it happening right here. And I also made the coin come out at around the same time. So yeah, that's how you change that texture. Let's see what that looks like in total. As a quick recap, we got two different textures here, two different principal BSDFs, plugged them together into the mix shader, and then we made our own factor to decide which texture will be shown where. So that is the way. Alright, so moving on to the next one, and this is actually the coin that comes from the brick, and I have animated it to go up in Z direction with a rotation on the Z axis as well, I think 720 degrees. Now, when it reaches the end, it is transparent, and this happens gradually. You cannot see that right now because we are in Eevee, but trust me, it works. What we do to get this is make a very simple setup with a principal BSDF. It's actually some type of gold material that I've made from scratch, and then we add a mix shader in which we also plug in the transparent BSDF. And now we can drive the transparency with the factor of the mix shader, and 1 means that it is transparent and 0 means that it is still the principled BSDF. So we can animate that as I've done here, and it will slowly and gradually go over to transparency. So that's how that works. Let's go on. I have also got this Goompa right here, and I've done something very simple. I've actually animated the feet. I think we can better see that in this one. Yeah, it's just some type of wobbly movement, nothing really special actually. And I have parented it to an empty, so that when you move it around, the Goompa moves around too. So when its feet move, you can move it separately with the empty instead of animating the entire Goompa, which would get your keyframes in a mess. Anyway, let's have a quick look at the plant. So this is what that looks like from here. Not necessarily the nicest model you can imagine, but it doesn't really matter because I didn't model it to be this small. I actually modeled it to, let's see where it happens, because we need some keyframes here. Oh yeah, there it is. This is actually the original model. It's very big, and then I scaled it down while having the 3D cursor at the base of the stem of the plant, and then it went like that. And it's just a simple shape key, you know, I can drive it like this, and that's what that looks like. One thing I do want to note is that for this shot we wanted to have a 180 degree camera track, so that's what we filmed. And as soon as I got back to the computer, I saw that the camera track was just not going to work out. Why? Because for each and every frame once in a while, there was a motion blurred frame in which everything was smudged out. So what did I do? I had to go back to the scenery and reshoot it with a different shutter speed, and I even did it in a different FPS. And the first time it took me 4 hours to get, I don't know, it's not even a decent track. And the second time it only cost me 15 minutes and it got done. So make sure you're prepared for the pre instead of doing everything in post. In this shot, I composited the reflection in the glass, but nobody notices. Anyway, moving on to the next shot. So this is the shot where we went from 2D to 3D, and this required some thinking, and this is how I did it eventually. So I have this camera and I put the camera to orthographic mode. And I also played with the scale at different times of the clip, which means that I've placed some keyframes. I added a constraint to the camera. It's called the track 2 constraint, and I made an empty, and that was the target of this track 2 modifier, let's say constraint. This empty makes sure that the camera looks at that empty. So when I move it around, you can see that the camera follows along. This was necessary because eventually there's a twist and we go 90 degrees over there, and it would have been a painstakingly great job if we had to place keyframes the entire time to keep me in focus. And this is what it does. Now, you might be wondering, how did we get the perspective right? Because as you know, this is actually a simple images as planes. That means that it's not 3D. So when I move around like this, you actually see a thin slice of me, but that's not good. So we had to rotate it as well. And we shot this at the green screen so you can see what it actually looks like. And I jumped and I twisted 90 degrees and I had that aligned with the camera in Blender. And then it works. So that's how that is done. Add all the assets and all the thingies you need, and there you go. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant that I have with the earth. Rainbow textures, yes. So here we go. We have got this cube, and I have simply added this material of this cube to this jacket of Mario. The texture setup is quite simple. Well, this one had to be a little bit more complicated, so we'll use the cube just for example. So what you do is you add a texture coordinate and a mapping node, a color ramp, and then the color ramp, instead of placing it on RGB, you place it on HSL, and then you place it on far. Now what happens, you get two sliders and on each side, and it actually makes a rainbow pattern for you, which is very cool. I've placed it in a hue and saturation node, and I think I have keyframed the hue to change over time as well, just to add a little bit more randomization. And then here I placed a Musgrave texture, also driven by a value, so that these blocks move, and that is actually the translucency, which also operates on the same color. Now you get a rainbow texture and it animates, so you just gotta place your keyframes. Very simple. On the back of Mario, actually I placed a particle system. It's not in this file, it's in another file, but I placed a particle system which releases all kinds of stars and sparkly things. So that came in handy as well for selling the entire rainbow movement, because as you can see in the game, there's also a particle system trailing Mario as well. So there you have it. I had a shot where the rocket gets out of the wall. Well, the wall was there before. We actually filmed that on the scene. So I projected that footage onto the wall that I had made in Blender. Then I had to make some doors to open it and a structure behind it so that the rocket could actually be seated in there. So I started out by making a structure and I projection map our original footage onto this plane. And now it looks like the wall that we had originally captured on camera. I have made a block structure right behind it, in which I could fit the rocket. The rocket is animated to shoot out, and there's also a fire simulation added. There's also two doors, and I animated it to go up and down at the right time, so it reveals our great rocket. Now the rocket shoots out. This rocket, by the way, cost like 2.5 hours to make. Absolutely more work than I had thought it would, but this is what the model looks like, so take from that whatever you want. Another thing I noticed that wasn't really going well for this shot is the fact that perspective of this door. Well, let me move this rocket. The perspective of this door, if you follow that line all the way up here, let's do that, annotation tool, the line goes all the way like that. Now you can already notice that this line is not in the correct perspective, and that is something I couldn't fix anymore, and I already made the render, so yeah, it's just what it is. Alright, so that's it for the breakdown. Let's do some recommendations, some tutorials that I thought were very helpful in trying to make this movie. So the first one is Polyfjord's fire tutorial. It's one of the only fire tutorials ever that I followed and that actually worked out. Thanks Polyfjord. Last but not least, I want to recommend Dicko's channel for modeling characters, because I modeled the Mario character entirely with my mouse. Just modeling, no sculpting. I don't have any sculpting tools, so I just model it and it's done. So Dicko, thanks a lot. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, perhaps learned a thing or two, and maybe you want to join me on this filmmaking journey and subscribe.